software in general has lost favor and Bitcoin is software, that it's going to end. Could I be the type of person that could change my position on Bitcoin? I think the short answer to that is yes, absolutely could. I feel like, though, the near-term floor for Bitcoin is around 60, which we experienced earlier in the year when it touched the $60,000, what I would say intra-halving low. Now, I could be wrong on that. You can invite me back, say it's at 40. Cycle is very much alive. And if you look at cycle retracement, as you get to the halfway mark of the halving, you usually get a 40 to 50% decline in Bitcoin, and we experienced that. Bitcoin went from roughly 124-ish to 60. Bitcoin has scaled, and in my mind has gone exponential enough where it's now in the self-fulfilling prophecy zone that it will be treated as a store of value. And that doesn't mean that it won't be volatile. It certainly will. Could it trade to 40,000? It absolutely could.
Still watching your portfolio swing 20% and not knowing whether to buy, hold, or get out? You're not alone. Most people in crypto are just reacting. Very few are actually reading the market. This channel is for the ones who want to read it. Bitcoin, macro, on-chain data, institutional moves. We cover what actually drives price. Sharp analysis, no noise. If you're serious about this market, subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming. You're about to hear something that doesn't happen often. A Wall Street veteran, Goldman Sachs background, White House, decades managing serious institutional money, and he's sitting here in 2026 saying he would buy more Bitcoin at $40,000. Not panic, not hedge, buy more. That's Anthony Scaramucci, founder of SkyBridge Capital. And what he lays out in this conversation is one of the clearest, most direct Bitcoin theses you're going to hear from someone at his level. He's got a floor, he's got a cycle call, he's got a date. And he's looked at the ETF flows, the wallet adoption numbers, the Goldman and JP Morgan positioning, and he's telling you exactly what he sees coming and when he thinks it starts. He also says something that every skeptic needs to hear. Dalio hated Bitcoin, did the homework, bought Bitcoin. Druckenmiller hated Bitcoin, did the homework, bought Bitcoin. Paul Tudor Jones, same story. Michael Saylor called it a fad. 6 months later, he was buying. There is a pattern here, and Scaramucci thinks he knows exactly why it keeps repeating. Here's the full conversation.
And I've always reserved the right to change my mind on things, because I think what happens in life is if you get too doctrinaire or too religious on something, particularly in investing, then you really run the risk of danger. I think to say that you're a hodler in the early stages of Bitcoin is actually a very good thing, because you understood the technical properties of Bitcoin and its exponential adoption. And so just by not looking at the volatility, you did well, and you just stay in the position.
Mm-hmm.
If you're telling me that we now have this thesis break where there's now something wrong with Bitcoin, either there's a quantum computing problem with Bitcoin, or because the software in general has lost favor and Bitcoin is software, that it's going to end, could I be the type of person that could change my position on Bitcoin? I think the short answer to that is yes. It would be unlikely, however, and I would put it at about an 80% probability that I wouldn't change my answer, because I think something has happened to Bitcoin since the induction of COVID. So this is March of 2020 to you and I speaking today in April of 2026. Bitcoin has scaled, and in my mind has gone exponential enough where it's now in the self-fulfilling prophecy zone that it will be treated as a store of value. And that doesn't mean that it won't be volatile. It certainly will. Could it trade to 40,000? It absolutely could. I feel like, though, the near-term floor for Bitcoin is around 60, which we experienced earlier in the year when it touched the $60,000, what I would say intra-halving low. Now, I could be wrong on that. You can invite me back, say it's at 40, but I would really have to have a meteor strike in my mind to change my idea about where Bitcoin is going, because you've got 400 million wallets scaling to 800 over the next 5 years. You've got, and I see the numbers because, we have people out here that are looking at the flows. The flows for the ETFs have been extraordinary. The flows into institutions have been extraordinary. Large scale banks are now adopting Bitcoin and are launching their forms of Bitcoin ETFs, including places that hated Bitcoin, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and believe it or not, even JP Morgan. So all of that, plus what I think will be eventually the passing of the Clarity Act, makes me think that what you're saying won't happen. But it's a really good question. And I would say to you that I believe that Bitcoin, irrespective of its near-term volatility, will maintain its standing as an eventual store of value. And so I don't want to sell my Bitcoin. I probably would buy more at 40,000. And I would also say that when we got to 60, I didn't quite get the 60 low, but I was buying Bitcoin at 63, 64,000 a few months back.
In general, it doesn't seem like those numbers scare you at all. You seem very calm about a potential 40K scenario.
Yeah, but you see, I've been, I was bought my first Bitcoin at 17,000, went to 69,000, went to 15,000. That didn't scare me. So I don't think anything coming is going to scare me.
Makes sense. And how about this Bitcoin 4-year cycle? Is that something you think is still consequential, or do you think that narrative is a bit overhyped?
I think that is consequential. And I think that people that are ignoring that or trying to pretend that this time is different, I think those words, this time is different, are the worst words that you can hear in the world of investing. I think the cycle is very much alive. And if you look at cycle retracement, as you get to the halfway mark of the halving, you usually get a 40 to 50% decline in Bitcoin, and we experienced that. Bitcoin went from roughly 124-ish to 60. Again, I'm choosing rough numbers, and it's rebounded off of 60. And I think that if I'm right about this, the reascension of Bitcoin will happen beginning in the fourth quarter, starting on or about October 1st.
All right.
And that would be consistent with the 4-year cycle. So, there are people like CZ, a lot smarter than me, a lot richer than me. He thinks we're about to enter a super cycle. I don't see that. I see this being more traditional 4-year cycle dynamics. I want to be fair to smart investors. I was in the rat poison camp. I met Hal Finney in 2012. He made a presentation on Bitcoin. I didn't understand it. I think I put out a tweet, caveat emptor on Bitcoin. I don't understand it and don't care. I then met the Winklevosses in 2014. They tried to explain it to me. It was only $60 a coin at that time. I didn't understand it, didn't care. I then was in the White House a very, very short period of time. It's very infamously known. But I could tell you the exact day. It was a Wednesday because I was only there for one Wednesday. I met with 2 Fed guys, and they wanted to digitize the U.S. dollar. I actually put out a white paper on it. And I looked at that and said, over the blockchain? I say, over the blockchain. So it was in 2017 that it dawned on me that I needed to get up to speed on this. So what I would say to very smart investors that listen to your show is you got to do the homework. You can't be the naysayer for the sake of being a naysayer and having a cursory look at the situation. I think Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are 2 of the brightest minds that have probably ever lived. And it's a wonderful joy to have had them be alive at the same time that I've been having the opportunity to be alive here on Earth. They're 2 of the smartest guys ever. But I would just say they didn't do the homework on this. I know this from friends of mine that are close to them. People that do the homework, I'm not saying 100% of those people are going to buy a Bitcoin, but I would imagine if you did the homework on this, you spent the time, could 90 out of 100 buy a Bitcoin? Ray Dalio hated Bitcoin, did the homework, liked it, bought Bitcoin. Stan Druckenmiller did not like Bitcoin, did the homework, bought Bitcoin. Paul Tudor Jones did not like Bitcoin, did the homework, bought Bitcoin. I can go down the list. Mike Novogratz, Michael Saylor, we're both talking about him. He said it would fade. He said it was a fad. 6 months later, when he realized what it was, he bought Bitcoin. And so I would just say to people, if you're actually doing the homework, what you realize is that Bitcoin has all of the elements of everything that we've looked at in terms of the value of money. And so the immutability, the fungibility, the ease of use, the trust in the network, the trust in the system. If you read Neil Ferguson's book, The Ascent of Money, he gives a very clear historical analysis of what becomes money. Wampum, seashells, silver and gold with Roman Empire profiles, Roman Emperor profiles stamped on them. we use different things as totems for money. There's a piece of cloth in my pocket. It's 75% cotton, 25% linen. It's the US dollar. We know from, we were in philosophy class together, that piece of linen and cloth is worthless, but it's got $100 on it. The maitre d' would like it if I gave it to him, or so would the valet. It's a piece, it's a tool that we trust, that we can transact with each other so that we don't have to barter. Bitcoin has every single thing on the list that we would use for money throughout our society. And by the way, you can't make any more Bitcoin. You can find more gold. And, you know, the U.S. government is printing dollars. We know that. Okay, so they're monetizing our debt through the increase of the supply of dollars, which is weakening the living standards of the average American. So for all of these reasons, I would want to get people comfortable with understanding, learning about Bitcoin, and then eventually buying one. I think Goldman Sachs printed its best profit ever. Bank of America, which also owns Merrill Lynch, printed its best profit ever. And so those are the reasons why the market has been buoyed. There's a lot of share repurchases going on in the market. But you'd have to be concerned because, in the immortal words of my old boss, Lloyd Blankfein, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, the 1,000-year flood happens every 4 or 5 years on Wall Street. We have some type of catastrophe. And I can tell you, I'm almost 40 years on Wall Street. I've had 9 catastrophes. I can take you back through every single one of them. Crash of 87, the 89 debacle with the United Airlines merger breakup, the 1991 Gulf War, the 1994 David Askin crisis, 1998 was long-term capital management, 2001 was the World Trade Organization and the NASDAQ slide, the NASDAQ bubble, the tech bubble burst. The 2003 was the start of the Gulf War. I mean, I could take you through every. 2008 was the global financial crisis. It was probably the worst one. And so we really haven't had a major shock to the capital markets since 2008. And so let's count the years that we're out from 2008. We're 18 years out. If I just told you that the 1,000-year flood happens every 4 or 5 years on Wall Street, and we're 18 years out from the last flood, you'd have to be worried about the flood. You couldn't sit here with a straight face and say everything's hunky-dory. So you then, you know, for me, we're positioned fairly diversified here at SkyBridge, but we own a lot of Bitcoin because I think Bitcoin will decouple. If we're right about the store of value thesis, Bitcoin will decouple and will actually trade up if there's more market volatility, which, by the way, it has done recently. You know, the induction of the Gulf War, the Gulf War III, Bitcoin's actually traded up over that period of time.
So that's the full picture from Scaramucci. A $60,000 floor. A Q4 reascension. October 1st is the date he's watching. And a broader macro argument that says we're 18 years overdue for a serious market shock. And Bitcoin is the asset he wants to be holding when it hits. What stands out to me is the specificity. This isn't someone waving their hands at a number on a chart. He's looking at wallet adoption scaling from 400 million to 800 million. He's watching ETF flows he describes as extraordinary. He's seeing Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and JP Morgan, institutions that spent years calling Bitcoin rat poison, now launching their own Bitcoin products. And his point about the smart money conversion pattern is one you should sit with. Every serious investor who dismissed Bitcoin and then did the actual homework ended up buying. Every single one on his list. That's not a coincidence, that's a signal. No, none of this is financial advice. Scaramucci is managing institutional capital. His risk tolerance, his time horizon, his position sizing, none of that is yours by default. Do your own work. But if you've been sitting on the fence, if you've been waiting for someone with real credibility to give you a clear framework, this was it. If this conversation added something for you, drop a comment with what landed hardest. Subscribe if you're not already here, and share this with someone who's still in the rat poison camp. We'll see you in the next one.